one of the stopwatch apps.
Oh,
I tried
hey.
it out earlier, and it automatically uploaded to YouTube.
That's pretty awesome. Yeah, I saw that one on the How Big the Post thing.
Yeah, I think you look at that.
Yeah, we did. Yeah.
You're like, yes, I'm
I did that.
I didn't want to say hello. I'm looking at him trying to do the
Oh boy. Oh, sorry, that's our sign from.
It's our big
I
day.
literally have rolled out of bed and then walking time. We should all have like graphic marks. Or like those giant eyeball things.
Yeah, we did. I did that.
I didn't want to say hello.
Oh, okay. It's the kind of thing where you know, that's how you really sad. Okay, well, that could really easily set up. Let's start in small groups. So did everybody seen the notes from the first two meetings that happened in the spaces? The first two brainstorming sessions? Yeah. So basically, we've just been, the purpose of these sessions is to kind of like flesh out the idea that the board came up with like a new event structure. We want to switch from sustaining ourselves with the bookstore to sustaining ourselves via events. And so the ideas that we come up with around that is sort of how to make sure that that new proposal is as inclusive as marginalized and more complex as possible, and also how to make sure that we're improving the diversity of the space with the organizations that we reach out to for events. So ideas we come up with around that are scholarships or funds for low-income people, so they can have like a pool of tickets no matter what. Also like a dedicated time every month for events that are free. So every single month we have a certain number of free events no matter what. And then for increasing the diversity, I think it's just like a lot of the discussion has just been about what kind of organizations we're going to reach out to have events in the space. And I think that that's something that we have a lot of control over. And so we just talked about like reaching out specifically to radical organizations with like POC leadership, stuff that like, in other words, hasn't really reached out to before. And so that's kind of where we're at with the new event structure. And so one thing that we haven't really discussed though, and a major reason for why the bookstore closed down to 2 days, but was only open for 2 days, is because we cannot keep consistent volunteers in the space. Like we have like lots of teams that are working and functioning somewhat, but in terms of like actually physically being here and opening up the space, those volunteers are not showing up. And that's a major issue, and it will be for any other structure that we use. And so it would be good to talk a little bit about that, about how to fix that, I guess. Because everything's gonna fail if there's no one here.
Can we go around and ourselves too, maybe say like if you haven't been involved, why you're here, and if you haven't been involved. I don't mean that in a good way. I was gonna say like why you're why are you here?
Okay, but the big chair has to start, right?
Yes. I'm Allison. I am currently on the board. I've been involved for about a year and a half or so. And I think feminist spaces are awesome.
What's your pronoun?
Oh, she.
Oh.
Sarah, you wanna go?
I'm Sarah. I've been lunch editor for, I don't know, a month or two. So still very much in training. Madeline. So it's not here. We met yesterday. We meet generally every Saturday, still for a couple hours. I'm a numbers person in my brain.
We need to.
She's yeah.
Some of us.
And yeah, and I mean, if any of you know Madeline pretty well, she's brilliant with accounting, which is not really my world. So she's really good for staying on board about with that side, which is awesome. And sort of more of the like, oh, if you sell this many books, then we'll make this much money, or if you get this many people in the store, we'll make this much money, which is unfortunately thus far still not enough, which I totally. But I would say when I first joined, I heard a lot of conversations about how are you gonna make money, and I was sort of normally like the numbers person. How are you gonna make money? But I was sitting here kind of going, what about the space? Like, what about the sentiments, the emotion of everything? I was sort of like flipping sides a little bit, and I was really concerned about that. But unfortunately, I guess money is like how we barter through our economy, so we need to make enough that we can stay here, so we can still keep doing good stuff for people. So that's Andrew and I were talking recently. Sorry, I'm like rambling. But I just want you to know who I am, because like I think numbers people are kind of like, ew, numbers people. But I am sort of, I guess, new to the world of, we were talking about like activism, but I feel strongly for, I don't know, women, and that there's some sort of path there for me, so I supporting people going forward. So trying to figure out how to get into that. Numbers is my gig right now, so I can be helpful. Yeah, it was. Yes.
I'm Katie. I have been volunteering with the communications team for 6 months, give or take. I missed the past couple of brainstorming meetings because I was at work, so I'm just here to get caught up with what's going on. Yeah, what's done it?
My name's Cheryl. He was a little this week. I've been coming to the Queers Limited Sci-Fi Book Club for about a year, and we're not meeting here the past 2 months, and I just wanted to come and see what the plan was. I did read through the notes. It seems like there's really fantastic ideas and that well plan, and I just wanted to find out what's going on in anticipation of another little. We're going to sci-fi book club on Wednesday. Talk about books in general.
My name's Claire. I'm gender identified, so I've been communications co-lead with Jesslyn since last November, but I've been involved in some way, in other words, for about a year. Since that spring. I've also done a lot of work through and I wasn't able to make it to the other brainstorming sessions either because of work or personal stuff. So I'm here to get caught up and find out what I as a volunteer can do to participate in this process.
Excuse me, I started coming here for a yoga class, and I got going to volunteer meeting and found out, oh, there's all this stuff happening. Oh, I'm from Oregonian, things go on. Oh, that happened. 2 blocks more away. So, anyways, I was on the fundraising committee for the last. So, I think I've missed meetings.
You have done an awesome job.
I have actually
Lynn is
got
an
a check,
excellent
which
fundraiser.
I'm burning a hole in my purse right now. But anyway, I've been kind of out of it, and then I go on the site and say, oh, fundraising, oh, what's going on? So I'm kind of here to see, what's going on, what's the status? I make a personal request. Could you like speak a little slower?
Yeah.
Especially if it's going on wherever that's going.
Yeah, this is
NSA or whatever.
streaming, I guess, NSA and YouTube.
Since you're putting away from it, I think it's going to be really hard for people to understand.
she, her is great.
She-
Well, not both at the same time, that could get.
I meant me, I forgot.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay. I came to one of the quasi-emergency meetings back in the fall. I've been working at the library on and off for about 6 months, although Susan was away, and so I breaks off in my shirt. I couldn't resist the siren call of yard work, so I disappeared for a little while. Then I'm back. Sorry, I didn't make it to the Thursday meeting. I don't use Facebook, so I probably why I didn't know. But it's great to see everybody here for the first time or again.
I'm Adrian. I'm on the board. I'm operations chair, and I use she and her. And I believe a lot in the new event proposal, and I also think that it is something that's going to need to be developed by the community in order to be successful when it can't fall to the board, which is why these meetings have been extremely exciting for me. And I feel that Portland desperately needs a radical feminist space. Like there are a lot of radical spaces, but there are not a lot of spaces that are safe for women or genderqueer people or any other people if they're super patriarchal. So I think that something like this needs to exist, and I'm excited about the future of it.
I'm June Day. I've come to different workshops here, use the library, bought books and look at some things. I love this space and I love the new life that I feel being brought into it. I'm excited about the new proposal and I want to support that in any way that I can. I'd love to see some more people of color and trans people and radical people like brought into this space, specifically on the board, making decisions with the General Assembly. And I just want to help anybody can.
Hi, I'm Maria. She or they is fine. I come here for meetings and events for 3 months now, and I am interested in carving out spaces that are safe for queer and trans people of color, community of color, because I would like to go there. So one place that's safe for me, believe me. So
I make this thing, so
I'm gonna carve, yeah, and I'm gonna say what I can, do what I can tell about.
I'm Nikki, I'm there. Let's see, I had a very terrible impression of, in other words, for years. And a lot of that was based on what I knew to be trans misogyny. And when I caught wind of the inclusivity meetings and the restructuring that was happening, I don't know if this project is still happening, but there was like a volunteer group going through and getting rid of like turf and like gender critical materials. So I heard about that and I was like, and I'm here to support radical change within, in other words, because I believe in space activity and I believe in our ability to shift power to groups that are underrepresented currently within the structure right now, including POC and trans folks, specifically trans feminine folks. And I'm happy to be here. Oh, and I'm new. I just went to just the other these sorts of meetings.
So I gave like a recap of the last two meetings before, but I was probably speaking pretty fast. Is everybody clear on the stuff we discussed prior to this meeting?
I was here last Sunday, but I wasn't here.
Okay, so what we talked about was how to make sure that the events we're having in the space are reflecting the community that we want to have in the space, which is, as everybody has repeated more than once, people of color, trans folks, queer folks. And so reaching out to organizations with the intention of specifically targeting POC-led radical organizations and like organizations that are seeking for trans people and getting those events within the space. And then, so the conversation that emerged around that at the last meeting on Thursday was perhaps having like a volunteer committee that was tasked with that specific work, because a recurring concern is that the board often acts with autonomy, and that kind of puts people off because the organization is specifically structured so the board doesn't have like complete control of everything. And so having that task be up to the board would not be in keeping with how we report. And so that was what the takeaway that I got from that last meeting was like, do we want a volunteer subcommittee? And like, what kind of standards do we want to come up with for what organizations we're going to reach out to for events?
One thing, because I know you also brought up like volunteers and how to keep consistent volunteers, and talking about, you know, also too, how do we keep there from being like imbalance of power, and also too, people just being overworked and not sharing kind of with the community all of the different needs that we have. And one thing that I've thought about, but and I guess this kind of goes back to just how we're structured in general, but it's like we have people that pop in and want to volunteer, and we have a lot of people who I think want to come here and also meet other people and make connections, and I don't think we foster that at all, and I think that's why we have a lot of volunteers that come for a couple of times and then never come back, because I think people are looking for like a home base where they can meet people, and we're not providing that now. And so I don't know how this would work, but I've always been like, why do we not have like one big meeting a month that everybody comes to, where we talk about what, because I feel like part of the problem is that, you know, in serving on the board, I see that it's like all of these things pop up, and then I think people on the board just feel like they need to get them done because they received the email and they don't want to drop the ball and blah, blah, blah. And then nobody else ever knows what's missing, you know, like we're saying like nothing, you know, like, oh shit, the store's not being staffed. And yet we never have any kind of forum aside from Facebook, which people are not checking all the time, and a lot of people are not on, and things like that. And we might be leaving out certain communities by just having things on Facebook.
Well, then stuff just happens.
Right.
And we don't know why it suddenly happened or what the need inspiring it was.
Yeah, and I feel like it's just like that repetition of seeing the same faces over and over again. It starts to build community, and I think if anything that this place is lacking, it's that sense of community. And I think when people do walk in the door, they don't say like, "Oh, great! Like I know who that is," and like I can start to build friendships. And I think it's just that we don't see each other frequently enough to do that. And so I just think structurally, there's something that we could do differently to help not only foster bonds and community, but also like foster things getting done and spreading out the work. And I think too, like building our own leadership skills and just being like, all right, I'm taking this on, you know, does anybody want to help me?
The one thing that I always noticed sort of like being an issue with the people not showing up for their shifts and you know, the space not being consistently open or whatever is, I would often see, you know, somebody who couldn't make it to their shift for a personal or whatever reason would just post in the volunteer Facebook group asking if someone could cover them, and often they would get no response. So I think that what might make the, I guess, you know, showing up rate better, or sort of, you know, make it more accessible for people to be here for shifts consistently, is to have a more clear procedure of what you do if you can't make it. Because, you know, I saw that happening a lot, and it also meant that we'd sometimes have events scheduled here and people would show up and the space wouldn't be open. There's no like way to know what to do from there.
I'm gonna take my stack, so just in my head, in case anyone like wants to talk. So yeah, just keep that in mind. I might like just be like, hey, one sec, and then like have someone else speak if they were but yeah, that's super right. I think there's no, first of all, like it seems like an absolute no-brainer to have an all volunteer meeting in a space that we do. And also like to your point, like Susie mentioned that like there's like a lot of like logistical things that she wants to discuss, but there's no way for her to talk to all the volunteers besides the volunteer email on the computer that no one knows to check. So there's like no way to communicate with volunteers between shifts unless you're like face to face. And the Facebook group has a lot of people in it, but not a lot of active users.
I guess a good way to make people feel like a community is to not always have meetings that are like work related.
Yeah.
So like I know that where I work we have volunteers, and every once in a while we have just like volunteer hang out and do that, and so volunteers are just invited to hang out and snack and chat and get to know each other. So because it's true, like the reason I volunteer is obviously to help and you know give my time to something I believe in, and it's also because I want to meet with people. So if I'm always working or you know, the only time I show up is to do volunteer work, and it's never to like have socializing time. Then it's different. Were you gonna say something?
Well, actually, you kind of beat me to it. Thinking about, you know, doing an annual meeting and everything, thinking of some of the organizations I've been in over the years. I mean, in the past I was a union member, I'm a member of the Alberta Co-op, a few other things. I think it's always good to give people an incentive to show up. Because I don't know about everybody else, but at my ripe old age, as soon as I hear the word meeting, my first thought is, oh, crying out loud, another obligation. Haven't I got enough to do? Blah, blah, blah. But definitely play out the community angle, you know. Maybe not a keg, that might be a bit much for some people, but definitely say, well, you know, we'll put out some snacks, we'll have some coffee or some cider, and, you know, when the strategy part is over, you know, sure, we can socialize. Oh, heck yes.
Cool. That sounds like there's a desperate need for some kind of volunteer community outside of the stress of being students.
When I was here on Sunday, I'll try not to suck too much air out of the room here. When I was here on Sunday, it was just Louie and Susan and a few other people. I believe Louie and a couple other people touched on the fact that, and you mentioned this too, I believe, that it's hard to get people to commit to opening and closing.
Yeah.
Has there been talk about actually making that a wage earner type position?
It has happened.
Because maybe it's just, I don't know, you all tell me, maybe it's just too much to expect that to be a volunteer thing. Maybe it should be a job. You know,
Yeah, it's
a
part of
real
the-
job, even if it, you know, doesn't pay a fortune, you know, it could pay something, and that would definitely motivate people to come in and commit.
I think there's different options for that, maybe. I mean, I'm, thinking it probably isn't in the budget, in other words, to make that a paid position with a fair wage.
Yeah.
But like, this is, me, for example, personally, I'm about to be applying to grad school, and I'm going to include my volunteer experience in my application, and I would, do a couple of shifts a week in exchange for connecting with someone who might write me a letter or something. Or if people are students, maybe there's a way to turn it into credit or something.
Right. So maybe a wage, even if not the ideal $15 an hour thing, could be a long goal.
I just think that like you risk, participating in the process of not paying people fairly. It is better than nothing.
So like the discussions that we had about the new event proposal included a paid position for a program coordinator. I think that if we're a social justice organization, if we're going to have a position like that, like we can't have a full-time job without health insurance. We can't we can't be that employer. And so like that's kind of what we run into, because there are realities of like paying for benefits, but you can't have someone 40 hours a week in a space and like not give them a way to take care of their health or whatever. Or like not pay them enough to feed themselves or pay their rent.
Yeah, I guess my perspective is just as somebody who, I started working here when I was part-time. And I was kind of waiting to see what would happen after my part-time job ended. I ended up getting a full-time job, and unfortunately, that was part of the reason I had to disappear. And I suspect that's actually what happens a lot. Is as soon as you have a chance to earn some money, that unfortunately has to become your biggest priority. But yeah, I see your point.
Someone else spoke first blood. I'm the first one to talk about money. And I mean, I think everything everyone said about it is totally true. However, unless it's a real change since I haven't made a fundraising committee meeting, I think our budget is pretty tight. And just to make what was already set as a goal, I don't think it's exactly a dead certainty at this point, to be unfortunately blunt about it.
Yeah.
And so I've been racking my brain trying to think of, well, what could we do to, make this bring more money. I know there's the event thing. But one thing it seems to me is events with more, more punch, bigger, more exciting things.
Yeah.
And it's not like there's no like big issues affecting women in this time and place. Now, I don't know about organizations in this area, but it seems like that should be something we would look at, especially even if we don't have these paid positions. Nothing gets cheaper. And I mean, I don't know how much margin there is between our bare minimum, the need for rent, and what the goals are, because I've never actually seen the document per se.
Yeah.
But this is going to start a fight. But as one of these communities you mentioned, I mean, I'm currently out of work now. And being trans is not the whole reason, but it's a big part of the reason. It's a big part of the reason consistently. Marginalized communities, part of being marginalized is you don't have much spare money. Okay. And the other thing is you can kind of hard to reach, which means you need to make a bigger noise to attract people. So this is just what I wanted to bring up there is maybe we should think about figure out ways to do things that are higher profile in some way, whether, a star unquote comes in, or whether it's, big issue that affects a lot of people, like the shutting down of reproductive rights all over the friggin' place, or, something that I think would be worthwhile to pay attention to.
That's absolutely right. I agree with you completely.
Right, that doesn't increase the number of things.
So you have to find a diplomatic way, I guess, to encourage people who have more to give more. They essentially have solidarity paying away if the person wants to give.
Were you gonna say something?
Actually, it's just a
I have them like behind the pillow.
Oh, sorry.
It was like, the thing, couple things that I wanted to comment on are that with the volunteer gathering, it could be like a social thing where it's like really fun to bring more volunteers in and further building that community. And then also like that helps people stay if they feel like this is a space where they would like make new friends or bring current friends. And then as far as how possibly to get people to volunteer ongoing, but the CIO does work trade for people to use the space. So if we're reaching out to radical groups and we want like Black Lives Matter or People Ag Black Chapter or any sort of group, one of the ways that we could reach out to them is to ask if they're interested in using this as a regular meeting space in exchange for volunteering. So that it's kind of like the CIO does it, and then but at the same time, like on a more regular basis instead of how the CIO does it, where you can like just go in there and volunteer like once.
Yeah.
And I think that makes it a little more difficult because you want people to be trained and stuff. But then it would like create like an ongoing relationship. It would help like groups or whatever that don't have a lot of money. And then I forgot the other thing. Sorry.
Well, that's a really good idea. I think that some kind of qualification is better than just like show up when you feel like it. Because it's like, and we are having the issue of like, how do we go to a paid event model while still making it so people who can't afford to pay for tickets can go? And I feel like that's a possible solution.
Yeah.
Like if you volunteer in our space, which keeps our doors open, then you get free event time.
Yeah, I would say that instead of just free event time.
Yeah.
Because I do understand that not everybody also has time to volunteer, but if it's a whole organization, there has to be like, can someone from your organization like agree to volunteer like 2 hours a week or whatever, and that seems to work out really well. Well, also like fostering that like ongoing relationship. And the other thing I was going to say is, I'm sorry if I missed this already in the notes, but if there's a list that's being created of organizations, because I think the last meeting that I came to, we were talking about how we're going to use like our individual like connections to reach out. So I didn't know if there was like a list so we weren't like overlapping or.
A list was started, like you mentioned, like 4 or 5, and then like that was a takeaway from the last meeting as well, that we all had connections to like organizations individually, and then we could use those connections to kind of like build a list. But the one stopping point for that was just like, do we want to have a criteria for organizations that we reach out to? Because you guys probably know, like we've had a history of hosting like kind of oppressive events here, like straight up turf events. And so we don't want to say like any organization identified as radical. Like we want there to be like standards for who we reach out to. And so that's kind of like where we were at the end of the last meeting.
Oh, sorry.
It's trans exclusionary radical feminism. It's basically a strain of feminism which does not regard trans women as human, basically. Like a straight up and there is like in the past there's been like equivocating, like, oh, both sides have good points. But really they don't. They really don't. And so that's kind of like, and it's like something that like has like an air of legitimacy still in the mainstream, which is why it's important to have criteria just so you can be like, this is a hard no and it's clear why.
So I'm hearing a lot about volunteers not showing up and like building community through kind of like shifting more autonomy and I think power to the volunteers. So could someone tell me what the current calendar, like how you sign up for shifts and what the policy is when you miss a shift at this point? Like, is it online?
I mean, the way it works now is that people either sign up online or fill out a form here. We've had volunteer coordinators in the past who then follow up with those people, get them to come to an orientation in which they're given this long laundry list of all the different things they can get involved in. People usually don't have a great idea of what they perhaps do want to be involved in because they're new and so they don't really know. So people sign up for multiple things and then they just get sent to, so let's say I'm in charge of fundraising. I'll get, okay, 3 people at the meetings that are interested in fundraising. And then I just add them to the email list, and most of the time I'll never hear back from people because either they decide they didn't want to, or maybe they decide they weren't really interested in fundraising and they don't want to come to the meeting. And then as far as staffing the store, then those people they have 3 training shifts that they have to attend before they actually start staffing. But I do think, I guess from my perspective, just in being involved for a long time and seeing the constant issues that we have around volunteers, and I don't think that it's our volunteer. I mean, I think there's structural things that we could do that could help with some of those issues. But I think, which I think would be really cool for us to keep talking about, is like how do we actually restructure that program to make it work for everybody, knowing that we don't have staff, so we don't have somebody who's here that can do kind of that training and hand holding that you might have at a more established organization where you go in and they've got all your info and they can talk to you for, we don't have, unfortunately, that structure. So we have to figure something else out.
So yeah, I did have a follow-up. So I worked as a volunteer coordinator for a number of years for a volunteer staff health clinic. And I could say a lot on the subject of volunteers. I could choose. They have the same position at the same clinic. One thing that, my overall takeaway from that was giving the most autonomy you can to volunteers to schedule themselves. And so it was just me and then 30 volunteers. And I was chuckling to myself at the last meeting because somebody was like, how many, I think I asked how many volunteers do you have? And they were like, eh. And I know the feeling because it's you have 5 people who are really dedicated and then you have 30 people who are go to this meeting, go to that meeting. I will say the structure right now seems overly complex to me. Yeah. And also assigning specific roles right away to a volunteer seems unnecessary. There are folks that would just come in here to clean. There are folks that love cleaning and would just come in here to and I, not to be an ass, but this place is dirty.
It is worse in some of my jobs.
Oh yeah. Oh, and I will say, I'm not gonna name the clinic I worked at. I get it. I get it. It's not an insult to the folks that are working here. I totally get it. So, not where I worked, but I did volunteer at the Hollywood Theater, right? So they're almost entirely volunteer staff. Yeah. They have a really good online scheduling system, and they also have very good policies on how to get your shifts covered. And I tried when I was a volunteer to make a hard and fast, if you don't show up for 2 shifts in a row, you're out. That can be kind of harsh, but developing policies like that are just really clear. If you miss a shift in advance, it's your responsibility to get it covered. Here's how you do that. If it's the day before, you need to text this volunteer coordinator to let them know, and then also try to get it fixed. Developing just a single sheet that's here's how you get your shifts covered. Or if it's, you can't make a meeting, just giving the volunteers an opportunity to kind of create what they want for themselves without, plugging them in immediately. And the online scheduling system, and I can look into what Hollywood uses, is really great. So, yeah.
Can I ask as a follow-up to that, what, how in those organizations that you worked in, how do people get trained? Because I think that's been one of the issues of how, especially for things that are maybe a little bit more complicated, like running the register, and stuff like that. How are people trained?
So one thing is that I think Gina originally developed this very comprehensive document. So one thing is that, so let's say for closing and opening, these are the most important and complex volunteer things, and you don't have new volunteers doing that, you need to train them first. We would have one full shift where there was a staff member there for the entire time. And then also at hand, this very comprehensive document that was this is what all kinds of stores have, new seasons, I go to check my EBT balance and there's doesn't know how to do it. So they open it up and they follow these really clear steps on how to check your EBT balance. So let's say somebody doesn't know what the fuck's going on with the door or something. It's like what to do if you can't lock the door or whatever like issues that generally come up.
Guide.
A
Like,
guide.
How to answer the phone,
Yeah.
how to make a sale.
We do
how
have
to-
a pretty good. Yeah, we have. It's
Okay.
all paper. I was gonna ask, like,
Yeah.
what is how does that exist in the Argentine?
It did exist on paper,
Yeah.
but I will say like this, the place is that's very antiquated. Like you should have both. And so for the training, it would just be like one. I mean, opening this place shouldn't require more than 1 4-hour training. Like, and then if they like want to come in on another day, you can be like, here are like the shifts I'll be here is what I would do. I'd be like, so you have your 1 4-hour training, and then I'm here Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. If you want to come in for my shift and shadow me after that for as many follow-up trainings as you want, feel free. But like 1 4-hour training to open or close this place should be all that you really need. If you're like finding the right volunteers for that, which is, a whole other kind of bag of being gummy worms.
Yeah, and
Specifically.
I'm not trying to be too nitpicky, but like I personally, like coming into this space, would feel really overwhelmed just because of like how chaotic it is in here. Like it's not like a clean, flowing, like organized space, and that can be really hard for certain personalities to like come in and be like, what am I doing? Where do I get what I need? Like things need to be like clearly labeled and like.
So yeah, my emphasis on like it shouldn't take more than 4 hours is like. Thank you for the follow-up point. Is that like it shouldn't take more than 4 hours to open this place and to figure out what's going on here, but it clearly does.
Yeah.
Exactly. I just.
I've come for the mostly just book club every third out year, and there have been occasions where the volunteer couldn't stay, and I was asked to. Well, only spoken once. I was asked to close, and I was shown how the instructions were. There were signs, but I was still extremely worried and didn't feel very comfortable. And all night was just thinking in the morning I was going to find a story like, the door unlocked in feminist bookstore ransacked. I appreciated that the volunteer was trusting me to do that. It wasn't something that I felt comfortable doing as an attendee of the event.
Yeah, and you shouldn't.
Yeah.
To do that, like that's not okay. Like I like the way that our policies are set up. Like I'm supposed to be a volunteer for like all the events, but it just never works out that way. Like people have to leave or they don't show up, and so it's all the time.
It happened where we met 6:30 till about 8.
Yeah,
and it happened quite a few times.
I just remember what I was going to say earlier because I don't remember. Is that the question of a paid position? Is that it's possible? I know there's a volunteer coordinator before. Was that also a volunteer position?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Because it's a lot to manage other people, as you all know. But is that somehow be combined like in the duties of like program coordinator? Or I don't even know whatever the title is that you want to give it. But that's something that if it's well organized and streamlined, like could be like a part-time position depending on what it all entails. Because that's how the clinic works, and I wouldn't use that clinic as like a prime example for
No, Laura was
anything.
learning.
But yeah, but it was. I mean, it would have been possible to do that on like 20, 25 hours a week, I think.
Oh, for sure. And having like a touchstone there, someone every day, that's okay. If we are throwing around this idea of paying somebody to do that position, even just if someone's available for like 3 hours a day to just be like the opener or the closer, like that was what really worked for that position at the clinic was like a paid person. And and by paid, like I hate to, make it about money, but it's like someone that's either paid or very committed. That's a touchstone that is available to be there like daily.
Yeah.
I just want to also flag that like what I'm saying might sound like insulting or calling up history or stuff like that. And feel free to call me out if your like feelings are hurt. And I know like folks have put a lot of time and energy into this place. And I don't mean to like insult the state of it. And obviously we're here to make it better. But like if I'm pissing someone off, like I have a bad habit of doing that. So like just let me know.
When we were looking at paid events and so staffing someone who could coordinate events, the number that I think we came up with for them was about $30,000 a year. So I don't know if someone wants to just, because I just want to throw this out there that right now it costs $4,000 a month to run this place and we lose 500 to 1,000 a month. So someone who makes, let's make it easy, $36,000 a year, that's $3,000 a month. So we need to make up that 3,000 plus that 1,000 we're already losing, and then we're breaking even. So like, I think it is a lot, right, to have a volunteer person coordinating other people. I have a full-time job. If you ask me for like hot numbers every 5 seconds, like I'm at work, I'll get back to you 8 hours from now. Like I don't know how to coordinate people without that being a job. But I just want to throw that out there. That almost doubles the cost of running this place, and we lose money right now. So it would be excellent to appreciate someone in the way that you can pay them, but also like healthcare. If we truly value people and lives, then we gotta do it right. And that's, we gotta make this place badass and then somehow do that.
Yeah.
I don't know. I just want to throw out that little, it's like it doubles what we're already not making.
For sure. Yeah, it's not at this point, I think, a workable solution.
Yeah.
Like, if we were doing much better down the line, we could probably talk about that, but like, at this point, I don't think that we could afford someone, and also afford to have like, because if like event like doesn't work, or like no one comes, no one basically they have to pay someone.
Well, also to be perfectly honest, there's gonna have to, like, you would probably want this place to be at a certain point before you attract the right kind of person that wants to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's something
Like, I was
kept
like,
saying in the meeting, but like, who would sign up to work here right now? Like,
Yeah, like somebody that
might be employed a month.
wants a job and probably, but the last thing I was gonna say about that was talking about like how some people don't use Facebook and how some people come in and sign up to volunteer, some people do it online, like Mickey was saying, like having someone that's here even for like 2 or 3 hours, like 5 days a week, like a lot of people do a lot better with like face-to-face contact. So they can come in and see someone and just have like a brief conversation about volunteering too. That makes it good. Yeah. But yeah, I totally see. I mean, like obviously that's, I'm not trying to think of ways to fund more money.
No, it seems like having a paid person here would solve a lot of problems.
Yeah. I mean, maybe
There's like a cart for the horse or whatever.
yeah, and maybe trying to figure out how to like bring someone in like super like part-time or on like an initial internship basis or something.
We do have one paid part-time employee now currently, that's Susie, who's there, I believe, 3 days a week. I think, I'm not sure. So we do have that currently, but it's not feasible to add another person.
Yeah. I think the bulk of the work is going to have to be like a lot of people that just really love and care about this place and believe in the plan and are going to do like what it takes for overhaul.
And people that want to use the space for themselves. And I have no problem with volunteering, but people I love and feel comfortable in and want to make connections and stuff movies.
I think that is the part we can address the soonest.
Yeah.
Like the PA position is like so far down the line, it's just not even worth talking about. But like we can fix the feeling, like the bad feelings around this, like not necessarily by like, I don't know, just by like giving volunteers back their power and letting them know that this is a place where they can have like a direct back and decide their future. And like reaching out to communities that have been historically like pushed away from it. Those are things that we can fix. I think that would inspire trust in the organization.
One thing I was like, how do we get, when we did that in October, when it was that meeting of, in other words, might be slow, there were like 100 people in here.
Yeah.
And then, and then we did a follow-up meeting and there were maybe like 15, so how, I know we're not always going to get, like, I know people are in and out, but I think, and with it, this is something to think about with event, not only with volunteers and just people using the space, but with events as well, is that we do have really low turnout rate. And I think part of that is what we're offering. And I think there are many stuff, but I think just in general, like, does anybody have ideas on how do we, because I think we're sort of in this transition phase, but I think it's something that we don't have, we're kind of on borrowed time financially, so we don't have a lot of like the luxury of time. So how do we, do we continue these meetings just to get people to start, where you can at least learn about the organization so people in 3 months actually want to commit to volunteering? Because I know a lot of times it's like you go find out about an organization, but you don't really want to, you're not ready to volunteer until you've hung out for a little bit. Yeah. But I guess it's like, how do we start to build that stuff now, and so that people want to be in here and they want to come hang out?
Well, you probably need an event. Some a group of people, maybe a representative group, marginalized groups, whatnot, could pick a representative. People could put their heads together and say, what about X event? What if we absolutely had to put it together in 60 days? What would we do? as a dry run for what you see happening in the long-term future.
I would also bring it to rebranding and a conversation surrounding that.
Yeah.
As a conversation surrounding the idea of that being a starting point. And I don't just mean rebranding in the snidey marketing sense that I'm familiar with, but that too. But also, like, you all need a new logo.
Yeah,
It's happens to that. Sorry.
That's true.
But also rebranding as like we are trans inclusive, like we specifically like like say the words. Like this brought up at the last meeting and just like when we started making like the list to directly email these groups and be like, please come organize here. But like you can't just be like everyone can come on in. You need to specifically be like, these specific groups, like through an event, through your Facebook page needs to be more active, posting articles that are on point with an intersectional kind of feminism that seems to be your ideology based on what I'm reading on your website, et cetera, that I don't see that acting and in a real living movement. But like posting on the Facebook, board members and volunteers that are committed, attending events, like getting out there and becoming more active in that way, like rebranding yourselves in the way where you're like, we are this, what we claim to be, like movement and action.
Is there
Sorry if that
somebody,
sounds vague.
either you or somebody else you know with a feel for marketing? Because obviously you could reach out to Lemon Week, you could reach out to the Mercury, you could reach out to the Observer. There's probably other small papers I don't know about.
Yeah, Claire's actually our communications team lead.
Yeah. I mean,
Have you had any kind of halfway interested reception you've approached it with those folks?
I haven't, I mean, I've mainly been in charge of other things being, on the communications team so far, but, my degree's in journalism, I've worked as a journalist before, so that's definitely something that I could either take on or at least be the point person for.
I work in social media and marketing, and I'd be happy with it.
Or we can collaborate on it.
Another thing too, I think I brought this up last meeting as well, is that, well, take for example myself. I'm a trans woman. So I have a whole bunch, whole community that I could actually start talking with and start, really getting ideas for events and tie it in, to there. If we all really approach the communities we already belong to. So I'm thinking that maybe part of the marketing or part of getting the word out is just committed people who belong to marginalized communities, just on their own initiative, and on just go out and start spreading. I guess what I'm trying to say too is kind of a message of hope. It's not like we have to have these just for example, saying we're trans inclusive, just pointing out that yes, now we we're much more intersectional, whatever. But if we actually had faces going out to those communities, just that raw hey, then that would be ultra effective, and we have that here. So just reminding everybody of that.
I will say, having had events in the States, like what the groups that I organize with here, I think a lot of the reason why our events are not super well attended is because Another Rose doesn't really use its network to advertise events really super effectively. Like you kind of sometimes it's a super last minute just a post on Twitter and then that's it. But I think that there's we have thousands of Twitter followers and thousands of people like us on Facebook, but they're not super engaged just because we're not talking to them about things they believe in. And so I think that is one thing that we could do better internally, is just kind of getting the word out about events happening here that would appeal to people, taking on some of their responsibility. Because I think on our event contract it says that they're responsible for advertising their own events, which might be why they're so low attendance sometimes. But we do have a pretty wide audience. And if we're putting on events that people cared about, they would, and put out the word that people would come.
How do we get that going? Because I do think, especially as we're talking about kind of switching into a new model and needing to have events where people are actually paying to come, where right now we have free events that a lot of people don't come.
Yeah.
And I think rebranding is a really good idea for this at this point. But you know, like as far as that marketing piece, how do we do that through volunteer? You know, where it's like, I think part of it goes back to that like sort of control where you're like, oh my God, but then what if we tell volunteers they can all post on the page and somebody says something that misrepresents another word, you know, like not intentionally, but like somebody just posts something that's not appropriate or says something that's not appropriate, or it's not, we're kind of all speaking different. Like, is that really an issue? Are we being too afraid of that? Are there ways we can, are there ways we can like
Well, boards can be moderated.
mitigate that?
I mean, I think of another, I won't mention the names, I don't wanna like raise anybody's hackles, but I can think of another activist page that I canvass once in a while, and somebody showed up one day and started putting up a bunch of like nasty, like Jew bait, for lack of a better term, I am Jewish, Jew baiting stuff. I don't mean the kind of thing that talks about national or international policy that some people might construe that way, but just blatant nasty stuff that came straight off a white supremacist page. And I was pretty worried, and when I came back the next day, it was gone. The moderators were doing their job. And some people were upset, and they said, oh, you know, this is why I don't trust radicals and blah, blah, blah. But, you know, you get somebody who's sincere about moderating, and you hope for the best. And if you screw up because you were human and had other demands on your time, weren't paying attention, you just apologize. You say, I'm sorry. We didn't want to offend the marginalized community. We just needed to get there sooner. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
You're saying more of a moderator role versus these people are in charge.
I know a lot of
posting.
and I know
it's
there's
just
the whole, you know, we don't want to be authoritarian, we don't want to be, what's the word? How we have to hierarchical. But, you know, in real life, a little bit of that is necessary, because unfortunately there are people out there whose job is to wreck communities. They simply go into start trouble, and you have to be able to deal with them decisively.
You know, actually, though, I'm not thinking as anti-hierarchical. I'm thinking of that as people that would step in and take care of the space, and take, you know, protect and speak up for and be active. Now, I don't see the moderators getting this, you know, undue power. I see them kind of as, you know, defenders.
And like creating a safer space.
Yeah.
I will say also that giving, you know, if you are having, or you know, a group is having an issue where you know, we're afraid to give volunteers too much power to post on the Facebook page, or you know, to create this like event you're not totally sure and it hasn't been fully hashed out what the event is, but you know it's happening. You have a vague idea. The problem does not lie in where you're getting the power, it lies in the community that you're drawing. Yeah. And so like if you, for example, you know, somebody is like for the church events that you've referenced, somebody, you know, from what you didn't understand was like a gender critical event was happening in this space, and they're getting on the page, and you know, your volunteer comes in and it's like, this is transphobic, it represents trans misogyny, it's not okay. You need to have very clear policies surrounding like how and when you defend like your ideology in that space. Like, and I don't want to get too off track, because I think the rebranding conversation is really important. But like, I think there does need to be space given to the accountability process and how fucked up it is.
Yeah. Yes. So it sounds like we have two. First of all, like I think that the approach that we've taken to social media thus far, which has kind of been like no one say anything, doesn't work. I think a moderator is a much better model, and I think that's a change that can make pretty fast. And so I wrote that down. I feel like we should move forward with it. So that's a good idea that came from this. And then I don't know. I think do you guys agree with maybe talking about the accountability process first, and then moving on to rebranding, or how do you want to do that?
Sorry, I didn't mean to make it out into like, oh, the next things we're talking about either.
I like that structure.
How does Rudy feel about the ideas of rebranding that we've heard so far? Is there anything else to add?
Yeah, I mean, it's just a matter of like, what does it look like? Like, what do we want to become? And that's like a pretty deep conversation.
I just, obviously, nobody here means rebranding isn't like just painting a different thing over it, but I don't want anyone who's not here at this meeting right now to think that's what we're doing. It's like, how do you do it really genuinely?
Yeah.
Not saying it can't be, I'm curious actually, like how that happens without people just going,
they're just, you know, changing their words, changing their logo, and it's the same place.
Yeah.
So, what's that?
Oh, I've said, I've let Claire talk, but I mean, I think it's getting like fresh faces involved and people that are genuine in their belief that like, you know, like, so for a company that I work for, when we started rebranding, we started talking about making it more size positive, inclusive abilities. So, you know, putting like books and laundry like, in a chair and stuff like that. And it wasn't just that we were like, oh, this is good rebranding for marketing and like we'll be able to sell corsets to people in wheelchairs. It was like I really fucking believe that people that are in wheelchairs need to see those like represented on, you know, on the site. And so I think it's a matter of like these kinds of conversations and talking to people and knowing that like it means something when we're talking about rebranding. It's not just being a big sign.
But hopefully this won't derail. I'm gonna risk getting a little heavy here, but the word I find coming to mind when we're talking about rebranding is really, to me, just like being proactive about, you know, expressing the kind of place we are just by, you know, changing the things that we want to change. I mean, maybe that's overly simplistic, but if we're thinking of it that way, it's because you're just thinking of it as rebranding, and it's easier to come up with more practical ideas of what we want to do. But also sort of touching on the whole like fear of giving volunteers too much power thing. I feel like I've had the frustrating experience of coming in, wanting to be a volunteer, having the motivation to be very dedicated, and then having the power to do nearly nothing.
Yeah.
Because there was so much fear around volunteers having too much power. I mean, as an example, right now I don't currently have access to the passwords for any of the communications emails because they were all taken away from the volunteer leads. There was this, you know, fear climate that set in, and you know, maybe that's something we need to talk about more extensively at the General Assembly. I don't know if this is the place for it necessarily, but I think there has been this, you know, fear ruling everything, and
Yes.
I think maybe we need to say, you know, open up space for just trying stuff, knowing that there's a risk that it might not work exactly the way we do it the first time, but if it doesn't, you know, just apologize and then try something else.
Yeah, it's true. Trust has to be a team.
Because if we're just strangle-held by this, you know, oh, we can only give volunteers the ability to do this little bit of stuff because they might do it wrong, we're gonna end up right back where we started. I don't know. I feel like that was really inarticulate.
No, that's good. And part of the rebranding is like building relationships with volunteers and like building intentional, like intersectional relationships with volunteers. So the trust is there. Like, oh, we have these volunteers who like are obviously aware of like our message or what we stand for, and that's why they're here. So we can build more trust. But if it's not there, like how can we trust? But to go back to how to rebrand genuinely, I think it is by a lot of it is by letting the community speak and like some of the communities who haven't been part of like haven't had a seat at the table, like come and talk about like what's important for us, and for people who are, you know, more of the dominant culture to step back and let that happen. And I don't know what that looks like particularly, but that's how I view it. So like you said, like we all have we're all connected to our own communities. So kind of, you know, bringing to the table like what our communities want and focusing on that.
And like genuinely.
Yeah.
Not just saying it.
And like I don't want anybody like, for example, like I don't want like a white woman to talk about like Latino women, like what's good for us, you know, like that's ridiculous and it's not going to be genuine. Like I feel like the people of their own group can speak for what they need, and so that's like a really simple way to be genuine about our intention and our rebranding.
Well, and also like I don't know how like the fear climate came about or how this division between like I'm not trying to be dramatic, but like how the division between like the board and the volunteers and the general public came about, because the board is made up of volunteers, and so anybody that is working here, whether it's like their first day or they've been involved in other works for years, it's like a potential board member, and regardless of that, like has just as much stake in this space as anyone else. So like the whole, hierarchical way that things have been going and that obviously haven't been working for a lot of people in this space is just, I don't know, it's just interesting to me. Like,
Well, I think part of it must be the time commitment.
yeah.
That some people just don't have the luxury of committing the same level of time and energy, but obviously, being human beings and caring about the space, we all still want to be represented somehow.
Yeah, and in restructuring, I think it would be good to keep in mind like better ways to support members of the board. Like there's a reason, and it could be personality, it could be a number of reasons why things have gotten to this point. But we certainly don't want division to be created because some people are overworked and then they feel like they have more stake in this and they're like holding on. I mean, I have no idea, but it seems like support is needed, better support is needed like all around.
You guys are kind of.
I was just gonna say, like, I think we're on the right track as far as talk. Like, I think we all, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like we're all kind of on the same page of knowing that this place really needs to shift in dramatic ways as far as how we talk about ourselves, how we interact with all the different communities, and I think how we structure ourselves too internally as far as volunteers and board, because I do think it's a lot of it is structure issues. But how do we keep, like, for instance, rebranding, how do we keep that moving? Because like I said, we don't have a lot of time, and is like our month, do we need to implement monthly meetings that now happen? Is that too infrequent? Or will people show up to twice a month meetings? Is that too much for people? I guess it's kind of like, how do we keep these things moving? So I think we're on the right track.
Yeah.
But I think we can all sit here and have this conversation and then do nothing about it. And
Well, it's
just
okay.
stagnant.
I don't think you should be afraid to learn by doing. If it seems reasonable to try meetings twice a month, which gives people who might already feel overcommitted the chance to at least get there 50% of the time.
Yeah.
And it doesn't work out over the long term, you can change it. There's always that option.
I do think that we're in kind of like a sprint right now because we originally in the plan for the infrastructure plan that we're voting on the 25th, we're going to restart events in May. At this point, as Sarah said, we're losing money by keeping the store closed and we're not bringing anything in. With the 2 days that we're open, we're not looking at for the month that we're losing. So there is kind of a sense of urgency happening. Like, I don't think that meeting once a month, especially because there's like the GA in 2 weeks, and then we're supposed to open again. It's not going to be enough. Like the reality situation is it's going to take like a pretty significant amount of effort on the part of the board and the volunteers to feel committed enough to participate in the process to make it happen, and it has to be kind of like in a condensed period of time.
Yeah. So I have a clarifying question on that point, and I like when hearing from you, like, let's talk about it concretely and how to make it work now. That's awesome. Like at the last meeting, I was talking to one of the board members, and I was like, oh, okay, so we could just create a spreadsheet of the groups that we need to reach out to, and then folks that represent from those groups can reach out to them. So like if we're reaching out to Hente Anita, we're not going to have me do that. That person was like, you just need to email this other person to get that started because they already do that. So they're just like,
right, kind of crush the energy.
You need to, yeah. And so, can these things even happen that we're talking about is my question. Like, does it have to be like, the board has to decide and like.
I'm just going to go ahead and say yes. Like, it doesn't work to defer to the board and that not functioning committee structure. It makes volunteers feel like they have no power. It makes the board take on everything, fail. I really feel like if in this stage we're like, this is a good idea, we should communicate to that large committee and then just do it. Just do it. And then it'll happen. If we're just like, we have an email of this person who's been delegated to do it that no one's heard from in like 3 months, it's not gonna happen.
So we're gonna have a meeting?
Do we want to do that? Do we want to commit to like twice a month meetings?
I think twice a month, like just open community meetings, and then maybe where we have some kind of like rough sort of, not agenda, but like, okay, this is sort of what we need, like this meeting, we're kind of focusing on this broad thing, and that way people can come in and come out and contribute and be helpful, and if they don't want to commit to something, they can just come and give input. But I think just making those flexible meetings, because I know I probably won't come to everyone, but like, yeah, I can pop in once a month, and
and taking meeting notes too, and having those
Yes,
dispersed.
exactly. Like each one of these meetings, make sure that they're getting seen somewhere.
Yeah.
On that note, for next time, Danny, just let us know that it's really hard to understand the streaming.
Okay. I'm gonna
So
do
for
it better.
next time, set a
better.
mic or something.
Like they said, or something.
So someone have a mic?
We can, they probably
I would also, if folks are comfortable with this, like I would love to walk out of this space being like, here's our first event. Because we keep talking
That
about
would
the
be
events,
awesome.
the events, the events. But like, can we do that? Like not like decide what it's gonna be and how it's gonna happen, but just be like, okay, like here's a date. We're gonna make something happen that's gonna generate some capital.
Well, I was about to say, like, I feel like a good kickoff would be like whatever the first of these twice a month meetings is, would be like a good event to blast, but we can't charge for that.
Cool, right?
If you were, I don't know how fast this will come together, considering that we're halfway through the month, but obviously if you wanted to have an event for May 1st, the obvious thing would be May Day. Well, somebody with the original history of May Day, not the pretend version we get on Fox.
Well, May Day would be wonderful,
Oh, yeah.
but just as long as, see, I almost think that's a possible free event. I don't think you should.
Oh, we
pay to
can't
come
charge for
to
May Day.
I know, it's just-
Well, you could still, you could still have a sliding scale.
Donation. May Day,
Donation.
we could pass a hat or something.
Yeah.
Something for the donation.
I think that
I only
also-
have my job through June, so you gotta strike while the iron's hot. I got a phony on that one.
I think that if we continue this discussion about rebranding, we could have a free event and generate money by getting people in the space. But if we were just like, hey, we're not in other words anymore, now we're like this, like all inclusive radical organization. We could fundraise in that capacity, not necessarily charge.
It's gonna be totally wordy, and I was holding my tongue before because I was like, oh, we don't need to spend 5 minutes talking about this thought, but because I was struggling with the word rebranding, and then I kind of kept thinking like rebranding is like trimming up a plant, and I was thinking this before I even said this, and I was like, but rebranding is like trimming up a plant, just like shaping it differently, and what it sounds like we're doing is like ripping out the plant, planting new seeds, and we're gonna be whatever comes out of that. So it's like almost rebranding is not even a word. We're just like we're just here are the things we're planning, and we're not even trying to like form a brand. We're just gonna be whatever grows out of this thing. I don't know if we can do something with like planting and life or something on this event. I don't know. Good idea. But there's just something about planting life that's I don't know. It's cool.
One thing that I've always wanted to do is like turn that lot into like a community garden because they have so much room.
We actually have someone who has offered to do that, but I didn't really know where we were, so I told her just like hang on, but I will be in touch with you. But she says she has all the stuff and wants to set together.
That's a good event.
By itself would bring so many different people and groups and
Yeah.
like to participate.
And then you're like digging in the dirt together. Bonding in some sort of really.
I also think we need to repaint this place.
Yes. I'm gonna pour out everything in it. Like literally
Yeah.
everything.
We need like a
I'm
redesign.
sorry.
We need to like
And that's like another thing. Like even when we did like the cleanup day with the board, like we still like no one wants to like just get rid of stuff. I was like, let's throw away everything, and we were just like, no, too careful. I feel like we don't have to be like that. We have nothing to lose. We've already talked about so much. We're sucking at more. I don't think
Don't hold back.
exactly.
Well,
Like I
it's
don't really
cleansing, so like just out.
I do think that like maybe as our first step before we try to have a big paid event is just to get people excited and like re-energized in here, and then I mean maybe like we're on a time crunch, but we have a little time. I think there's some fundraising stuff we can do to like help hold us over.
One thing that's kind of cheesy, but that people seem to be really into is like when you have people put in their bid for the new name.
I want to. We can do
I
that online.
love that.
Yeah.
And you could, I don't know, whatever your guidelines want to be. If you want to keep the initials IOW, if you know, like, I don't know, whatever it is. Like,
Thinking about renaming them also.
yeah, and you can have that at the event.
see
Like,
what
come to
happens.
the event, enter.
There's a feel when you say in other words. We don't want that feeling.
Yeah.
I want to hear from Claire really fast. We seem to have some apprehension around that. I didn't want to put you on the spot.
Oh, no, this is not necessarily. I actually think that could be a good idea.
Yeah. I also don't think it should happen in this. I think it should be like a community market.
Yeah, that's
Well, and I also think that we should be ready for criticism come from that by changing the name, we are expecting to somehow have a clean slate and like free of the things that hindered us in the past, which isn't really the case. But that was really all I had to say about it.
That actually goes back to what Nikki brought up briefly about like the accountability process and what it looks like and what's kind of great and failing. I feel like people here probably have some insight around that, and I want to give space to that if people want to talk about it.
I don't know, if it's a hard balance between like, because I want to see us move toward, giving volunteers more power and not having this, everything has to be hyper proceduralized thing. But we also do have to have a way of keeping the space safer for as many people as possible. So how do you create an accountability process that does room for that?
My understanding of the accountability process is one thing that happens is like somebody files a grievance, but then and then you have to like be interviewed about so there's like a committee that like interviews them, right? And then they are supposed to like remain objective, so they just ask questions or whatever. But then the person who has had the grievance filed against them, so like I punched Maria and then like Maria's like, Nikki punched me, like I don't get to know that it was like the punching. Like you don't get to know what the grievance was at all. That's silly. How are you supposed to make it really silly? Like that's like really silly. Like what's the whole
Yeah.
Like, you did a thing, but we're not going to tell you what the thing you did is.
But don't you and we're not
It's a really easy way to
How can you ever do better if you don't tell us?
I'm not actually sure. I do know that Olive and Caitlin, and I know they worked a lot on like building out, and I don't actually know what that is, but I do know that they put in some like just recently time into like refixing that. So I do think it might be worth checking in. Some of them are here.
Yeah.
But checking in with them just to see what that is, and then I think we can talk about what it currently is and if we do have ways to.
I also know that we just. I'm sorry.
That is the current process, though.
Oh, it is.
Yeah.
I also know that we just recently spent a lot of time like hashing out the safer space policy, and not that it needs to be completely redone, but I think that there's probably a bit of clarification that's needed because I'm not going to name names, but I've heard of the grievance policy being used by people to claim like that someone's being reverse racist and ridiculous stuff like that. Because the current phrasing says, something like, no actions that are prejudiced against people of any race, gender, blah, blah, blah. And that phrasing leaves room for like, oh, you can't be prejudiced against white people, quote unquote. And so like, the grievance procedure as it currently exists is very, very flawed and something needs to be
Can I
done.
ask a question and I'll ask anybody else can chime in? Usually when I hear the phrase reverse racism, what I think of is somebody was having a theoretical discussion and they failed to speak about my dominant group in nice glowing terms all the time. I mean, is that the kind of thing you're talking about? You're not talking about like
about somebody
a slur or actual insult against an individual's character, right?
I'm talking about somebody spoke about a dominant group in critical terms or less than, complimentary terms, and this was considered prejudice against that dominant
Okay, that's
group.
what I just wanted to make sure we were on the same page.
Yeah.
I mean, like, can we be open? Like, somebody was like, the board is almost entirely white and cis, and then somebody was like, you can't use my race against me. Oh, but that's.
Okay, well, good.
So that happened.
That
and then there
individual
was, like,
situation aside, the phrasing of the current safer spaces policy
Yeah,
allows it
allows
to
the
be used
retreat.
that way.
I don't know if that's a failure of the policy as much as the failure of the person that I don't.
It's a failure of the person and then a failure of whoever doesn't like tell that person that that's bullshit and that's
I
not
hear
how
what
the
you're
policy
saying.
is used.
Yeah. I don't really know how you can, like, if you're a person that's going to be like racist against white people, like what can anyone do about that besides be like, no, it's not. You know what I mean? Like,
There just has to be room to be able to say, no, it's not, so that the person making, a ridiculous complaint like that can't say you're failing to enforce your own safer space policy because this person is, expressing prejudice against, someone who's white and cis.
Well, I know the one thing that's helped me in various situations, I don't know if obviously it works for everybody, is, when I've been in spaces where we've discussed thorny stuff, there's the principle of you attack the argument, but not the commenter, which means that if somebody tries to complain about reverse racism, you reverse that. You say, you act like this argument attacks you, but it doesn't. You need to step back and think about this, even though it's an emotional subject.
I don't know. I don't know exactly where the flaw lies. I don't know if it's with the safer space policy itself. I don't know if it's the grievance procedure or both. The fact that someone was able to make a plausible sounding case for using it that way and it actually moved forward, to me is a problem. And it's something that's going to come up again.
Yeah. What do you mean? I'm sorry, I must not have heard about that before. What do you mean it moved forward?
Meaning that the person who the complaint was being made against was actually contacted and told that they, had a grievance against them and needed to be
That, yeah.
Like that shouldn't have happened.
Like that shouldn't have even happened. The buck should have stopped, as this is not a legitimate.
And then of course they were like, and we can't go into specifics about what the grievance is.
Yeah.
We need you to meet with us and we'll ask you questions. Like that's like spooky shit.
Yeah, that doesn't seem fair.
Yeah.
Maybe the safer space policy should have something about acknowledging your privilege.
Yeah.
It might help.
I think it does. I think it says be aware of the space you take up, be aware of your privilege. It's in there.
It does have that.
Yeah. I think that it's a failure of the procedure. Like I think that I have not seen anyone either. I've asked her. I don't know what the status of it is.
Yeah.
I think that it needs to be drastically changed. Like I don't know how different the new one is, but like the current one clearly does not work. Like there's too much discretion to like use it in like a vindictive way or like in a way that's not appropriate. And it falls a lot on the people who are on the HR committee. And so that might not be the best way to do it.
I also think too, there's like I think that we've had issues with just communication in general.
Yeah.
Where I think, and I think at some point too, it's like, in other words, as an organization, like we obviously need to address things, but there's also the part where there is like personal responsibility and where you have to at some point kind of, I don't know, it's that like fine line of like, how do you create a space and create community and create conversation, and also knowing that like individuals have to do that work.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I think you just have to interrupt it. Like it's clearly in this particular example, like there was no one at any point that was like, no. Like you know what I mean? Like there was no one that was like, this is not okay. Like we can't move forward with this. And, like that is what is missing from the process.
It's hard for people to do that in Portland, sorry to say.
Yeah.
New York City, somebody would have stomped on that in a big hurry, but not Portland.
Also, like, we're, this structure, the nonprofit / corporate structure, which is what this nonprofit structure is based on, right? Like, it's based on a corporate structure.
Yes.
It doesn't place the onus on any particular human, right? Like, it's just like, look at the policy, and this is the policy. And so, like, we don't discuss what the grievance is because that dehumanizes the situation entirely. And we're only talking about like what happened and if it broke these procedures, and not to like make this into a huge broader discussion, but like that is the patriarchy. Like that is a patriarchal structure. And so I think that needs to be said out loud.
Yeah. And I don't know much about the accountability process, but when somebody like when the grievance is filed or whatever, who gets to see that? Just like a select group of people, or is it just the HR committee? No, and that's a lot put on them to judge what's right or wrong. I feel like it should be like maybe not entirely community because I don't know how I'm still figuring out what accountability looks like, but there should be a little bit more.
I think that part of the issue is that we do not have a collective idea of what accountability is. It's like we only have a collection of individual ideas, and that is part of the problem.
Yeah, I participated in the accountability process recently that worked really well, in which someone had been harassed by a member of a group, and they approached the group that I organized to address it because they did not feel safe taking it to the person directly. And so all we did, like the complaint itself was shared with everyone, and like they were like, this is what happened, this is the complaint, this is what we're gonna do. Do you want to participate? And then at that point, you had the choice if you want to go or not. We had a meeting with the group. We told he came with like his group. We came with ours. We were like, this is the problem. This is what we need you to do. Like, stop contacting the person. and like it can like stop here or it can continue, like we're gonna talk again. But basically like it was just extremely direct. And that is what is not
and like clear, like everybody has to weigh in on it, because like I don't know, like if there's a grievance that doesn't really, like it's not particular to my identity or my situation, and I'm not well versed in to decide whether this is right or wrong. So there's a bunch of people that help me, I guess, to see what's happening and we have a clear understanding what's right and what's wrong for our community.
Exactly. Like that was the thing that struck me the most, was that everybody was on the email, everybody knew what happened, and at the meeting itself, we were face to face with the person who was at fault, and we were like, this is what you did, this is why it's not okay. Like our grievance process is like, we won't even tell you what you did.
That's so
but
weird.
it's not okay.
And it's resolved in a subsequent way.
The dude's a giant jerk, so who can say? But there's like
For the rest of the
like the person
that person, you know, I'm sure probably not, but
yeah. And now that like now the people that he organizes with knows that he did this, and now we all know that he did this, and now he knows that we're watching it. So it's like it's actual accountability.
That gives the person, whoever it is, like I think a much clearer opportunity to be held accountable and take it seriously, and it also creates a lot of trust between the people that are holding the other person accountable. You know, like if you're doing that together, like you know that you're on the same page, that you're doing the same work.
Yeah, I think that's, and I really think that like part of being a feminist organization is like living as a woman in this society, like you are forced to appeal to structures for your protection that do not have your best interests in mind. And I feel like recreating that model here is harmful. Like I think that we have the opportunity to give the power back to people who don't have it in like outside contexts, like out beneath larger culture, to like decide what works for them in terms of like resolving things like that, and like what works for them in terms of like accountability. I feel like we should open up the process. And
One has discussion, my name has a thing where we basically appoint when there's a grievance, there's a committee appointed to deal with that. You know, an ad hoc committee at the time. Yeah. On the other hand, we just had a horrible thing basically starting about a year ago where something happened and people most concerned about it didn't want to go through that process because they found it overly bureaucratic, because after that, once this committee does their finding, then there's a whole bunch of other stuff, you know, over 100-year-old meeting, you know, and stuff just stuck. But if a process, something serious happens and people don't trust the process, that really misleads them, because it's still not perfect.
Excuse me, I have to go. Everybody that has conversations, the conversation I give it to someone.
Yeah, I can share them. Are you gonna share them on the?
Oh yeah, Thank you very much. I look forward to attending events here.
awesome, thank you. Yeah, so I think it sounds like, I don't know, like the closeout process isn't working the best for our community. I don't think it really ever has. Like going back through old board meeting minutes was like extremely educational, because I saw like the same thing kept happening. Like something occurred and it was like either like not talked about, or like it was like they were really isolated, and then like it kept happening over and over again where like something bad happened, like there was not an adequate response, and it like hurt the relationship before it happened. So I think that just like something drastically different would be the best for the organization, and it just goes along with rebranding, like changing who we are. Like, do we want to be like the super bureaucratic patriarchal organization, or do we want to be like a radical feminist organization? We can.
This is actually two I should brought this up in the last discussion, but for rebranding, as I think maybe like in the 60s, I can tell you that I think it's a generational. Be very word just, you know, draws the hair up on the back, because it's just somebody said slimy marketing. Sorry, that's what it is.
Yeah.
Okay. Now I don't think that's what is being talked about, but there was discussion that what the new name should be would be something to throw out to the general community. Yeah. Okay. Maybe what the rebranding project is, and should that be a thing? I'm sure that it would go. I'm sure that the people who have an unreasonable generational reaction to it are a small minority, generally, as I am here. But it would give more of a, people would have more invested in it. And it would go smoother, I think, if it was brought up as, hey, should we do this? Rather, we're doing this, and which one do you want to pick?
And also in the process of like talking about this, I think it's important to own up why we're doing it.
Yeah.
Like that's big, because otherwise it's gonna be funny marketing. Otherwise it's like, oh, we're changing everything so nobody knows what happened. But that's wrong. That's what's been wrong this whole time.
Yeah, if there's a general opinion that for some reason the name doesn't encompass everything that we want, then yeah, just come up with 5 or 6. Here we go with the marketing thing. And come up with 5 or 6 bullet points that tell people, well, this is why we don't think it's adequate anymore for what we'd like to do for the community. People want to know that.
One thing is like that. Well, that would be back to the Dunning Sunday, right? And then something about the event that we were talking about, like that there could be organized in some way where we could also be doing like a presentation and like having discussions with people about like the vision for the new thing, and within that also be asking for input or drops in a jar for names and things like that. And but while simultaneously figuring out how to do it in a way that would like bring them in, so that maybe other like radical organizations could promote themselves or something like that. So that would be a really good. That could be a really good space to have those conversations and like be really transparent about the idea of what we're doing.
We can use a different word.
I hate saying it because I'm like, it sounds so corporate.
I mean, like, I'm of the opinion, like, you know, my social media, I mean, the word branding can do a lot of different things. I'm like, I don't want to dilute my branding, so I have the same, like, icon as I do for my Instagram, as I do my Facebook, you know, it's like, the idea of branding, I think, extends past, like, capitalism. And so, but anyway. Yeah, we're talking about image, and our image needs to represent what we are. I think we can all agree that. Right?
I think we're talking about like me, everybody hates the bird, Felix
I was totally going to propose put a bird on it as our new name.
I've always felt grateful to the fact that it had some bird on it.
Yeah, it's like a different bird. Like sometimes it's like this, sometimes it's like sitting there like with its beak out.
I just like Cornelia has brilliant birds.
Yeah.
Period.
Oh.
Yeah, I mean, I love actual birds, but like any non, like.
I mean, Portlandia, I think like we can't have a conversation about what this place is without talking about gentrification, and I don't want to like open that up, you know, 100% unless people want to go there. But I will say that Portlandia has fucked up this city in ways that cannot be changed, and part of that does have to do with people moving here and they have this idea of what it is as this white utopia. You know?
I can't really blame Portlandia for that. I mean, I moved here from the East Coast 30 years ago, so that's been going on for a long time. Portlandia is more like a sign of what is happening.
Yeah, no, and don't get me wrong, I'm not blaming Portlandia for gentrification.
You don't know it's really the New York Times. You don't know it's really the New York Times that's responsible. They're the ones that won't shut up about Portland.
Be quiet. Yeah, but I just being linked up with them for this place and where it is and how like incredibly like white dominated this space has historically been, it like bothers me in a way that is like really deep seated and
It bothers me too.
I'm
Cool.
with you.
I'm sure. So we're coming up on an hour and 45 minutes. So maybe for the last 15 minutes, we can kind of talk about next steps, like concrete next steps, to keep moving momentum. So it sounds like everybody's like pretty universally on board with rebranding. I don't even know what else to call it, so I'm just gonna keep saying that. Rebranding. It sounds like we want to have 2 meetings a month to continue the process of developing this plan and also implementing it, because we're gonna have to implement it pretty quickly. And it sounds like they threw out the idea of a volunteer committee to begin developing that plan in an official capacity and a policy around organizations that we reach out to. So do we want to like set a date for the next meeting and then set a date, I guess, for the event we're discussing, and then kind of identify who should do what in terms of those next steps?
So for these like twice monthly meetings, we want to talk about like times and like I feel like because I know we don't want to leave people out like working. Like should it be a weeknight and a weekend? Like what people have thoughts on how we can be open, keep it open.
This time seems to attract a lot of people. 12 is on Sunday.
It's generally workshop.
We'll just have to last.
Not the last Sunday of the month. So I guess like 12 on an alternating Sunday and then 1 night during the week.
Yeah, and if heaven forbid you can't make this both meetings, is there I don't mean to be such a stubborn ass about this. Is there a non-Facebook location where I can catch up on whatever happened at the meeting?
The WordPress blog. But another.
Oh, WordPress, okay.
Yeah. Do we send out an email?
I've only mostly communicated with people who also volunteer in the library, so if there is a great big giant list, then I haven't seen it.
Alright, I'm just gonna pop down my notebook, and if you haven't already attended that meeting or written down your contact information, just write this here, and then we'll get the notes from this meeting.
What was the proposed days for the monthly meetings?
We didn't pick a day, we just said a weekend day and a weeknight day, and we said 12 on Sundays, seems to work pretty well, but not the last Sunday.
I do think too with those, if we can start to do, and maybe this just goes out to our full like email list instead of just doing this newsletter one, with like actual stuff that people can involve, but like at the top of those things, like put action items of stuff that we really need from people. And that way we just start to engage people better, because I feel like we're always being like, oh, we don't have volunteers, and then we're never like, hey people, like a couple people are like, oh shit, we don't have any volunteers.
Yeah.
And nobody knows about it. We're not telling you.
So when should the next one be? Let's pick the date for the next one. The next board meeting is this Thursday at 6. Is it here or at Chapel Hill?
I don't know.
Are we committed to actually doing an event in May? In that case, it might be prudent to meet again next week.
Yeah, but we also can't move forward with the new event structure proposal until after the GA on the 20th.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So, and it also has to go through. So like right now, what's going to be put on the GA is whether we want to rebrand, whether we want to adopt the new event structure proposal or retain the bookstore model. And then there was something else. I should know this.
What has happened?
Rebranding.
Is there going to be a keg? That's very important.
No, that is a very.
I think I go just get
Like, push this kegger, I like it.
I will totally bring the keg. There's no point in being a corporate tool if you can't buy your
Is it
colleagues
too
will be here.
close to the General Assembly for someone to put forth a proposal to change the grievance procedure?
No, that would be amazing to discuss.
Because I would like to see that accomplished then.
Yeah, I
I'm
mean,
willing to write something up about that. I mean, I also hesitate because, I don't want to just write up what I think would be the best idea of what to do and expect everyone to go along with that. But I think that's something we should discuss about.
Yeah, I also think we could look at just doing, like having quarterly GA that kind of fall, if we're doing these twice a month meetings, maybe one of them every quarter is considered a general assembly, and that way we can keep stuff moving like you're talking about, because I don't know, like you said, we're ready to like define what that is, but I think that we shouldn't have to wait 6 months to then get,
I definitely think we should have general assemblies more often.
So the General Assembly is this coming Thursday, right?
no, that's a public board meeting. So that board meeting is also open to the public the first part, right?
This coming Thursday?
Yeah, and then the general assembly is April 25th.
Is that a ball on WordPress too?
That is, yeah, it's on the board.
Sweet. I think it's really great.
Thank you. Thank you for coming.
I'm sorry, where's the first board meeting?
I think it's here. Let's just say it's here.
Yeah, I think so. I don't think there's any particular. Okay, so we still have not picked a day for this next meeting, so let's think about it.
The GA is Saturday the 25th.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be good. So what day is the 25th?
It is a Saturday.
We have the inclusivity meeting the first Wednesday of the month.
So that would be on like the
That would be
29th or something, I think.
That would be the last.
So that wouldn't be it.
Oh wait, that would be on like May 6th or something.
How are the inclusivity meetings different from the brainstorming meetings?
It would be May 6th.
We use one of the inclusivity meetings for the first brainstorming meeting, and it is like the only currently publicly accessible meeting that happens in the space outside of these two ones that we're talking about.
Are there gonna be more brainstorming?
Not before the GA. This is the last one.
What do we think about that? I mean, do we think that there should still be 2 meetings plus the inclusivity meeting?
I would love to open up the inclusivity meeting to like a wider audience, especially because we're getting like pretty good attendance.
Yeah.
We have last few times, so that'd be pretty awesome to get like more voices.
I think we should combine them rather than having 2 meetings that are basically there to accomplish similar things.
agenda items on the.
I think so, and I think that like we have to keep the principles that we established in that committee in mind for everything that we do, so it makes sense to have it as part of that policy. Okay, so the 25th is Saturday, the next meeting would be the next week, so I'm looking for.
Wait, so are we combining the inclusivity meetings with the other?
Yeah, with one of the.
So then could that just be the day? Could one meeting be the first Wednesday of every month and then the other one could be like the third Sunday or something?
Yeah, definitely.
And then on each of those agendas, there would always be a part in which we discuss inclusivity and how to make sure that anything that we're talking about is that what we're?
Yeah.
am I on the
So,
right?
so if we go with that, the next inclusivity meeting would be Wednesday, May 6th. At 6 o'clock.
So we do the rebranding of part of the inclusivity.
Yeah, and that's pending the vote of the GA. So that actually works out pretty well because there'll be like a week between the GA.
And then the third Sunday or something could be the next.
Yeah. Okay. So the third Sunday and the first Wednesday of every month will be these 2 meetings. Oh yeah. Okay. And then yeah, as I said, this board meeting this week is open to the public, and I would really like if people like have come into our board meeting, so like no one's like caught by surprise by what's happening or whatever.
Is it at
6:30.
6:30, and I believe it's in the space. I think that's what
We'll just say it.
Okay, when we say that, just say it.
We'll confirm. We'll confirm.
Well, I mean, we can kind of decide, like, you know, we got 3 of us here,
I'm
right?
looking at the calendar right now. There's nothing
The
on
other
it.
3 can.
If you want, we can stay in touch, and if that changes, I can.
Because I need one.
If not, the only other place is at Chapel Pub does. But I think let's just make it here. There's no
Yeah.
reason it cannot be here. So
There's no conflicting event on the calendar right now. So, like,
Dumb logistical question. Has anyone explored, is there any progress at all on looking at our neighbors next door? The places for meeting places outside the store?
all right.
yeah,
Usually it's a weird sitting situation in there. Like, only like there's not like a lot of space for a lot of people. Like it's kind of like clusters.
No.
There's like a space door. So we have a date set for the next meeting. Claire is gonna work on developing like just like an initial like, restructuring of the grievance policy, which is awesome. And then before the GA, like we just kind of have to prepare. I don't know, I'm gonna do like a PowerPoint or something of like all the options. And then we wanted to have voting online, so people who can't make it physically to the space are able to participate in the votes. Like that's I think what's gonna be on the board plate, and anyone that wants to participate in that process to prepare for the GA.
And probably like, you know, I don't remember if there are still board positions open or not.
Yeah.
So you might want to, for the GA, to make that known in case someone is interested in.
Absolutely. Cool.
I had a couple folks in mind to ask, so I'm not saying that person.
Can I ask one question real quick about that? How, like, what, I guess I won't ask the whole process, sorry, but how long does the board have to, like, yay or nay an application? Like, can it just be left in limbo, like, indefinitely?
I'm not sure if there's a amount of time.
It seems like if somebody is, like, really interested and is gonna put the time and effort into that, like, they should get an answer either way.
I think that needs to be also, I mean, personally, I think that needs to be part of our, when we start doing these twice a month meetings, is really talking about restructuring the organization as well, because I just think there are a lot of structure, like you said, we have like 15,000 committees and it's confusing, and I think that there needs to be more brain power into talking about how do we make this structure more fluid, and also where it can still move and things are still getting done, and I think there are a lot of things we could do to do better.
Yeah, I think so too. And the one thing that struck me was that really uncomfortable board meeting, which Alex was talking about how we had not followed our bylaws, and there was like nothing
Jess
she
and I
could
showed
do.
up.
Like she was like, you guys, here's your bylaws, here's how you didn't follow them, there's nothing we can do. I feel like it's a pretty big problem.
Because it was like, well, there's like 3 different copies of the bylaws, so like I don't even know which one you're looking at.
Yeah. So it's just, I feel like, we definitely need to talk about the ways the board is structured in terms of how it's relates to the community and just have ways to improve that and make it something that people can accept.
Just use the bylaws that you guys signed.
Pretty simple.
Well, and
But there also has to be like, there has to be like recourse if we don't, you know, and bring
You know,
up
there actually currently isn't any in.
So it's like the crazy bureaucratic structures are meaningful.
Well, there's an expectation. There's an expectation in the bylaws that the bylaws will be followed. I mean, one of the things that board members sign on to is the duty of obedience. But there's no procedure of any kind of what to do if that isn't.
Yeah.
You know, and you know, not that I'm like, you know, wanting to like be like we should put the hammer down, but like there has to be something we can do.
Yeah, I definitely agree.
like my impression at that meeting, like after it was like very obviously it was very like fueled, but like afterwards I was just like, does anybody realize like that like this system that's being held onto so tightly is like pretend almost, like if nobody's following the system, it doesn't exist, and so what is anyone holding on to anyway? Like, and it was just funny to me where I'm just like, why don't the other board members just decide that that's not cool and they're not
It
going to
came
stand
out
for
of
it? I don't know.
crisis response,
There's a lot
is
of
my impression.
yeah.
You know, there's been this whole idea for a while that we're in crisis, so we need to act immediately to save the space, and as a result, that all got thrown out the window in service to the crisis. Well, now that, you know, we're trying to end the crisis and get back to actually functioning well as an organization, we need to start using that again.
Yeah, and I like what I don't know where she went, the gardening person.
Yeah,
I can't remember her name. But I think anything that's gonna come out of like restructuring a new structure, like new anything, kind of falls under what she was saying, and that's like it doesn't have to be forever. Like, things can be changed. Like if it's not working, you change it so it works. You don't like hold on to it tightly, and even if you're not even really following it, you know, like that's the one thing is I was like I understand why a lot of things are happening, but I also was kind of like, oh, when you step back and look at it, if you're not even following it, it's not working.
Yeah.
It doesn't even work. Like,
So can people still meet here? Because I don't want to speak for this person, Laura, but I believe that they're saying that their queer feminist sci-fi book club was unable to meet here anymore, that's a fucking travesty.
yeah.
So like, in the meantime, can things still happen again?
We've shut off everything during the week. If there are events that are happening during the weekend hours in which we have staff and are open, then those things have continued. But it's really just the ability to continue to staff things and have people that know how to like appropriately open and close the space. Like
That was the main motivation for going down to 2 days, is that we did not have volunteers. Like we would have like the door straight up unlocked, like the alarm would off and no one was here. Like things, like lots of things that just like weren't working. Like people just like straight weren't coming, and like events were not like you had to like break the door open. Like,
There was one infamous example where there was a workshop here on the weekend and no one was here to open the space, so I had to break it.
and that's like you
That
don't-
was the security breach that was being referred to.
Yeah, I
Like,
heard
one
about
time-
that security breach.
Sorry.
but it's kind of like, you know what I mean? Like we can't have you like have your event here and then also figure out how to. It's a puzzle. Figure out how to open the door. Like it's not. It's not.
Figure out how to open it.
It's a feminist challenge.
I guess had you is exaggeration. I got so mad that it wasn't open that I just decided I was going to.
Well, like yeah, like you should not have been put in that position. You should not have been.
Nobody should ever be in that position.
So yeah, it's kind of like it's what we have to work with right now. Like we can't, like we want events in the space, we do not have the staff.
I forgot.
Staff do that.
Well,
I
maybe
forgot
there's a
about-
radical puzzle group to do, Jeff.
Unless
I forgot about the alarm system because CIO, it's like they just give you the key box code. You go in, they tell you like, here's what you do afterwards. Make sure you clean up after yourself, and then you put the key box box and leave.
we have a lockbox.
You did that last time.
Yeah, we have a lockbox. It's just like the alarm procedure is just not being communicated in the way that people are able to follow or something.
Jeff made it very clear to me.
Yeah, I don't think it's on her. I just think, I don't know, like if you're like hosting a random event and you like it just ends up being the person who has the code, like I feel like something's not being communicated. So it's extreme.
Well, yeah, I mean, I decided to do that because the event that was being held was a workshop that participants had paid between $10 and $25 a ticket for.
Yeah.
Like, so if it didn't happen, you know, that was going to be completely lost all the way.
I just think like getting folks and volunteers trained and in here to be able to staff like the events that like folks are already doing here or like have just like had to stop should be like try to get that on the top of the pile of our workload.
And if we're doing the model, which I think the Berlin model is a model where you volunteer to be able to use the space, the people that might come in and use the space have already like done the process of volunteering and they know what to do.
Yeah.
So if we don't really need anybody else if they have that knowledge.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
So can I just ask, what's the status right now? We've all in this not open during the week thing, as far as like training volunteers, hiring lots of volunteers, as far as building up to where, say, May 2nd, we start having regular hours. What's the status of that?
I believe we just lost our volunteer coordinator. Right?
I think everything is kind of on hold, but I think I guess my hope is that if we can get these meetings going and start to use those, like instead of relying on one person who has to recontact people and maybe that person's sick or out of town or has like a super crazy workload for a month and doesn't get back to people, like if we can start to build those as the times where volunteers come and they learn and can give input and people and they can pick up pieces and say, oh, like I'd be willing to come and staff that one thing. I feel like that's right now a better way for us to go about than like having one volunteer coordinator that's trying to manage everything. I don't know. I just feel like
Also,
I just feel like structurally like that doesn't work either.
I would also like to propose doing an opening and closing space training for people who are interested in hosting events. I mean, I'm a volunteer lead, have been for some time. I'm not trained on how to open and close the space. I did it completely, off of instinct.
I mean, maybe that could be part of every one of those meetings is that we do a really quick, like, here's how you open and close a space. So if you do, and we've got an event that wants to be in here on Thursday, can somebody do it?
That's a really good idea.
Thanks everybody for.
Because it's not difficult. I think it's just people forget. It's like they get trained once and then they don't do it for 4 months and then they're like, oh fuck, how do I what's the alarm code again? I totally forgot.
That's what happened to me, yeah.
Yeah, I think if we could just do it.
I knew everybody how to do it, but I didn't know
meetings and we have a group of people that it's like, oh yeah, I can do this.
Yeah, that's a really good idea. So yeah, that seems like someone's there next week. We have a date for our next meeting. We have some stuff to prepare for the GA.
Sorry, the first Wednesday of the month that's an evening one.
Yeah.
First Wednesday of the month at
6:30.
And then 12 p.m. for the third Wednesday of the month.
Third Sunday.
Third Sunday. That's what I meant. Okay, sorry, thank you.
Cool. Alrighty. Any other last thoughts before we adjourn this meeting? No.
Just out of curiosity, it has nothing to do exactly with what we're talking about, but does anybody know who that guy was that came in?
No.
He his name is Bar.
He's signed the list.
He's been I've seen him at different meetings before.
Okay.
I don't know much beyond that, but I know that he's been to meetings and he knows like some other people that are.
Okay.
Yeah, I didn't know how to deal with that because we're open right now, but I was kind of like, who is this schedule thing? Like, why is he?
Yeah, exactly. And it was really kind of uncomfortable.
Okay.
I might be presuming too much, but I was sort of tipped off just because I'm a caregiver at a mental health facility, and a lot of our residents are formerly houseless people, and I kind of think you might be part of the local potentially, and just comes in like to be in the space around other people. I don't know for sure, but I've seen him around at other radical type spaces before too.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
I didn't really say, but he never really identifies himself or something.
So the woman that was sitting right here, so I thought that maybe she heard them.
Yeah, that was the first time I saw him.
Yeah. But as soon as she was like, hey, I was like, okay. I'm fine.
So
I definitely get why you felt uncomfortable.
Yeah, definitely.
And I thought to myself, why is he just sitting here silently?
Yeah, like when you're like in a feminist space and like a random dude comes in, you're just like.
I was like, oh, I'm not our problems right now.
I would have felt better if he had introduced himself.
Yeah.
If he at least said his name and what kind of connection he had.
Yeah, definitely. Because it is like a target. Like you get trolls online, you get trolls in real life, and so that's kind of what I was afraid of when I first time.
So do we think next time that happens,
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Or have a policy that's everybody introduces who they are and their affiliation with the space, and then when folks come in, give pause to let that happen.
Really?
You know what I mean? So that would be not like kind of, I guess, yeah.
No,
Seeing
I
the
like that
answer
the
to
state
gender
was not
is-
pausing to welcome someone else who walked in.
Yeah, definitely.
That's good.
Because we were absorbing what we were talking about, so just do better next time.
I'm glad that it was pointed out. Thank you.
No, I just, actually, I felt very bad because I didn't say anything, so.
So if there's anybody that would like to go over the notes and add stuff and et cetera, I'd like to be very transparent with notes for meetings like this, so, could anyone wants to do that, they could put the email address and I can share with them.
You can just start in my notebook. Just start if you want to.
We all trust you.
Jump this quota.
Alright, cool. So then they're ready to go, like, no one wants to add.
Thank you everyone for coming. I continue to have a lot of faith in the future of this organization. It's gonna be awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.